interesting. But let's go to the actual platform, to Zoom, and what were the challenges and the benefits of using Zoom and using really internet as a whole? Because you also use Google Maps to find and locate where different people of the audience come from, or you use Google Images to show different images of Odysseus or different images of Telemachus. So what were the pros and cons of doing it through the internet, doing it through Zoom?
So there's one big con that I had to sort of integrate, but that has to do with my actor. The fact that I'm not in a room with people, so although I may see faces, or although I know there are people there, the experience of me being in the same room with a sort of energetic thing going back and forth, that being out of the equation, that was really weird and something I had to get used to, because also, like, I was nervous before the show. But usually when I'm nervous before a show, once it starts, there's something happening there that it kind of goes away. But this time I had like the information that made me nervous, but at the same, my body was like, but you're in your home and there's nothing there, so why are we nervous? And then it sort of never went away. But that has to do with the actor. In regards to creating and devising the play, the thing is, with us being so interested in the whole experience and how the themes, questions, or whatever we're trying to explore, how that can be translated to the experience, the whole Zoom platform was like really ideal. And at the same time, we had been using it for so long in relationship to being in the distance, not being able to touch each other, or to have like the whole thing that we now, or at least when we started doing it, associated with Zoom because of COVID and because of being forced to be at our homes, and that frustration and that sort of sense of this related really well with what we wanted to do. And then at the same time, the fact that we had the chat was an opportunity for people to relate to the piece through two channels. The fact that we could say to the people, you can talk during the play to me or to each other, and that's there. And at the same time, you will not be disrupting someone that doesn't want to hear you. That was like a huge opportunity for this experience of the Asamblea. And then also, since we're talking so much about truth and about narratives, and how truth and narratives are built, and how these are built, and how there's this hegemonic main channel of information that can be and should be put in question or doubted, but that we have to do that act. The fact that we had internet and something like Google and Google Maps and all of that, it also related really well to the fact of this is what we pact that at some point we made, but that doesn't mean it is true, or that doesn't mean it is innocuous or not dangerous. And so it's sort of everything tied really well up. And once we started thinking about the opportunities, Google Maps was a great opportunity also to have a relationship with the distances that united us, and at the same time kept us apart. Also, the whole Google Images, it's really useful because once we wanted to talk about what one person can think about one thing and another person think about the same thing, the whole putting that in perspective with a huge array of images just by clicking one thing, that was really useful, because a lot of information went into that. And then also what happens during the piece, the fact that I can send you things to your home. You can do things in your home I am not seeing, but are part of the whole experience, and the whole, I am isolated, you're isolated, but we're at the same time doing the same thing, thinking the same. It kind of really tied really well up. And the fact that Teatro de la Abadía had this initiative also meant that we could see other people's work while thinking about our own work, and see, okay, so now that I am an audience member, what works for me, what doesn't, what things feel like, okay, this is an opportunity that should be explored, okay, this is something that sort of doesn't really work, and then we should think about what's happening there. So yeah, that was sort of the whole experience with working with the platform. And then about having your home, since the pandemic started and I did Zooms with the company and with Carlos Tuñón, we're really good friends, he from the beginning said, okay, that's a really good background for something, like a young person surrounded by books, and that's a really good background for Telemachos. And the fact that how can we also, this home, be changed into other possibilities, that was something that also interested us a lot.
Yes, of course, because people who are watching us now probably didn't watch the performance, and everybody watching now is actually seeing the stage behind you. This is the stage. Your home, your room, your intimacy is the stage. Thinking also about this
also because
yes.
When thinking about that thinking also about Telemachus, where does the waiting happen? And it's probably it's in also this question about what waiting means. When do we wait? What do we wait for? And for whom, or what are we waiting? And that in relationship to our expectations and what we think we should be, and what we really are, and what we think our life should be, and what it really is. That seems like really big, but we are in relationship to that in our everyday lives. So it's sort of, it also made sense that this could happen in a home, and not only in a sacred space like the theater, that is a space that has a lot of meaning, and then the experience of, okay, I'm going to this place for having an not everyday experience. So the fact that it could also happen here, it put in another perspective this question.
Yes, indeed, and one of the things that happens in the play a lot is precisely this insistence on isolation, and how the experience also of Zoom kind of brings our own intimate isolations together. So it's very interesting that you're saying the difference between kind of doing a play in that stage and doing it in the theatre, because of course the theatre, although it's a closed space, it's an interior space, it is a space of community, it is a space of bringing together different people. But Zoom and the play and the performance in a way does something that kind of cognitively doesn't work, and that is that we are together but we are isolated. So we actually together but not together, kind of together in an imagined together, not in a lived together. It's very interesting because it's in a way the opposite to what happens in theatre. In many cases in theatre, you're you are physically together, you can feel each other, but you are only one eye that looks, and so this is the opposite. You feel alone, but the eye is together, the mind is together. So it's very, very interesting how the format changes that completely, and how it
also
sorry. No, go ahead.
No, sorry. That also the theater is it's not my space, and it's not my home, and it's a special place. But the computer nowadays is maybe where I work and where I watch films, and it's an everyday object and an everyday screen. So now my everyday place and screen may also be resignified in another way. And at the same time, in the theater, I can't go and start browsing other things. Well, I can, but it's it's not a good
Yes, or you
idea, and
can't,
people are going to
turn
say
your
things to me.
camera off and go to the toilet, or you can't watch in pajamas. Yes, exactly. There is a big difference. Absolutely.
It's
yeah.
And that also makes a lot of sense with Telemachus having to deal with. I know I am not my father, but I'm going to try and be enough, and I'm going to try and have your attention and make it worth it. So that was interesting for me, because I knew they may be doing something else and be there, and I can't really know that. So that was nourishing in a strange way for what the experience of the character was.
Yes, that is interesting, because of course in many accounts of the Odyssey, the telemacheia, which happens at the beginning, sometimes is skipped. People just jump directly to after the telemacheia. So it's very interesting that the character of Telemachus is confronting the possibility that people will also kind of overlook him, even in his own play. That people can go to the toilet, that people will be able to do all of that. That's very, very interesting. I also like the idea of the interior and the exterior. There's something about that, and at one point, Telemachus does speak about that life is happening out there, that even his own story is being written out there, and that because he has to wait for his father to come back in order for everything to be solved, and in order for him to have an identity, because of course if he is the son of Odysseus, he cannot really be himself without Odysseus, so he needs to wait until he returns. And I think that's very interesting, that it works precisely with these intimacies of each one of us, that they fit with the moment in which we were watching it, which was also a moment of kind of history being stopped, history being in pause. Kind of history is happening out there with all of the different discussions that politicians and governments were having, and we were kind of waiting in our homes to see what would happen, when we would be released, etc. So I wondered if that was kind of that idea of kind of waiting with regards to COVID was part of the idea that you had, a kind of a waiting that also to a certain extent never gets satisfied. And I think that by the time we got to Christmas 2020, and never mind now, but when we got to Christmas 2020, we were already very tired of waiting and waiting for a solution that even now has not arrived. So I wanted to kind of think about waiting and COVID and isolation and the world happening out there, and a waiting that never is quite satisfied. How were those ideas kind of developed in the creation?
So the ironic thing, or the interesting thing, is that the whole thing about before was in this sons, hijos de Grecia, sons or children of Greece experience. I am really interested in the concept of waiting, and I'm really interested in boredom. I think there's something there to be explored, and that is denied, and that maybe we shouldn't deny, because I think we have to learn frustration and boredom and waiting, and when we were devising the play, and when I was exploring this thing about truth and also about Telemachus, etc., I talked a lot about, and it interested me a lot about the thing about waiting, and also the relationship with what you expect and what you thought you should expect from life and from yourself, and then what life and your experience is turning out to be, and how to deal with that frustration and how to relate to those expectations, etc., etc. I'm a huge fan of Dave Foster Wallace, and it was a big part, him, in the whole Telemachus experience before and after, before it being online and after it being online, and how he talks about heroism, and what we have learned is heroism, and what real heroism looks like, and the whole speech he has about this is water, and how what it means to be good, and what the real challenges of life are, that don't have so much to do with what we see maybe in television or with this whole show business, etc. And it has a lot to do with tiny dealings with being kind in a non-sexy way, and how to deal with frustration and with waiting, and that had a lot to do with the whole Hijos de Grecia experience, because we were asking ourselves what we had inherited from our fathers or from our history, and what we wanted to do with that, what we were supposed to do with that, etc. And that is Telemachus, and that is also us. So yeah, the whole waiting thing, and the whole dealing with the things outside not being right, and not really knowing what to do with them, and sensing that this should be different and I should be different, but I am not enough. But that has a lot to do with me, and it has a lot to do with Telemachus, and it was already in the play, and then the whole COVID thing happened, and it sort of it's really beautiful and ironic, because the whole situation sort of exploded everything more relevant, but everything was already there. And I also think that having conversations not around theater but around the whole pandemic experience, a lot of people feel like although it has been like a new and a shock and etc., in a lot of ways people feel like this has turned up the volume in things that were already there and that I was already thinking, because it also made us think a lot about what it meant to take care of each other and be kind to each other, because everything collapsed and priorities reorganized themselves, and also our relationship with work and our own exigencias, our own I'm going quickly in my head, and
Demands, our own demands,
yes, our own
expectations.
demands, yes, demands towards ourselves in regards to where I should be and how I compare myself to other people, etc. I feel I feel I'm circling around something, but I feel that has a lot to do with waiting, because this rhythm and this not being not giving ourselves the permission to slow down, to stop, to be bored and to be frustrated has a lot to do also with this demands and expectations that we should be better, I should be in a better place, I already should have this and this and this, because the generation of my father, my parents, they had a steady job earlier than I had, they had a home and they could afford a home earlier than, so I have this image of what life should be, and I am not there, and that gives you a frustration. But at the same time, there's this whole thing about learning to to deal with that, and with life being different from the stories that was already present, and that I feel that I thought a lot about it during the pandemic and during the lockdown, because of the pandemic and the lockdown.